We're in the gun on the campus of Kenyon College in Ohio, looking at a recent acquisition. This is actually a recent work of art from 2024. It's a weaving that was produced in the very northern part of Argentina by a woman's cooperative.
In English, the title of this work by Claudia Alarcón and Silät is A Path. This encompasses hundreds of years of ancestral knowledge as well as more recent history. This is woven with chaguar, a plant that grows in the Chaco forest. Traditionally, this method would be used for handbags. Historically, selling yicas, which is the name for the bag, was one of the only ways that women from this community were able to make money. Recently, a group of 100 Wiki women came together and formed the collective Silät in order to produce fine art out of this process.
And they have, in fact, been wildly successful. So their work is walking this fine line between cultural history and the contemporary art market. But I think one of the reasons that they have been so successful is their work is manufactured with a precision that is breathtaking. The relationships of the geometric squares one to the next and the color relationships are beautiful. It creates a grid and then breaks that grid in certain ways, especially in the lower third. The aqua breaks the more natural tonalities of the rest of the weaving.
There's a legend within the Wiki community that speaks to how central chaguar weaving is. The story goes that once only men were on Earth and the women were stars in the sky. The women wove their way down with chaguar to Earth and were eating the fish that the men had prepared. The men figured out that these women were eating their fish and they wanted to keep them on Earth and employed the help of birds to cut down the chaguar ropes. Women in this community around the age of 12 or 13 are expected to begin weaving and to begin creating their own bags, blankets, clothing. What Silät has done is they've made some changes in composition and especially in scale. The process is technically complex and impressive from start to finish. The women spin the fibers and hand dye them, also using local dyes. This is a relatively small work, but there are also very large tapestries that the women collaborate on. They'll sit next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, maybe 3 or 4 women weaving on the same piece at the same time. The process involves hanging the ends, usually between tree trunks, and there's a rod that is placed between each row, one at a time. The women then stitch the fibers together using different types of stitching. This is the antique stitch. It's a bit closer together, but this is also still very flexible. Oftentimes, these are also installed hanging so you can see either side and the light can come through.
The open stitch that allows light to permeate is not so different from the canopy of the trees that allows the light to filter through. And so it's sort of a lovely analogy between the ecological context in which these are produced and the objects themselves.
And the practice is entirely sustainable. The community doesn't cultivate chaguar. It grows in the wild in the Chaco forest. Silät also creates protest banners and use their work to declare their own positionality. In fact, the word Silät in Wiki translates to alert, warning, or message, and they chose that name to assert their presence, that this is their culture and it's still thriving.
And it's important to remember that weaving was considered the highest art form in South America before the arrival of the Spanish.
Important artists in North American and European fiber arts traveled to northern Argentina. The Bauhaus artists Annie and Joseph Albers visited the Wiki, and Annie Albers collected examples of Wiki weaving. There are examples in her 1965 book on weaving, which is so important for the pivot of textiles to be considered fine art. Silät is very aware of this history. This work formally engages with the geometric abstraction of Annie Albers by placing their signature, that CA and S, so centrally in this work. They're almost reclaiming that history. I would like to go back to the title of this piece, A Path. I read this both formally relating to the long and narrow composition and to this reclamation of history, that there is a path that these women are walking and each square is one step of the way.